Hi everybody, so on Thursday the A-level results are released, which means that many young people, 18 and 19 year olds, will be looking to go to university this coming September. And these results obviously are very important as to what university they want to go to, or if they want to go to university at all. But recently there's been something else to consider for students going to university, and that is tuition fees. Now, just before I get into any of this, I just want to say this is my opinion. Don't take financial advice because of what I've said, but do keep this in mind when you are thinking about going to uni, or not going to uni for that matter, based on the fees. Now, tuition fees get a pretty bad rep, and many people think that there should be a different system for funding higher education, such as straight from taxpayer money, so free education as they call it, or perhaps a graduate tax system or something similar to that, such as a endowment or other graduate contribution. Back when I was an elected officer in my students' union, we spent a lot of time talking about tuition fees, but what I campaigned on in my time and as an elected officer and throughout my student political career was no rise in fees from what they were at the time of £3,000. And to give you some context there, that £3,000 that the student paid was again a loan, and you had to be earning over £15,000 to repay any of it, and then you only paid 9% of your earnings over £15,000, and after 25 years it was wiped off. But what was the purpose of bringing in fees in the first place? Well, the target of the government at the time, which was the Labour government in the late 90s, was to have half of young people, 18 and 19 year old school leavers, going into higher education, which isn't necessarily university, by the way. It could be higher education courses at their college or other forms of tertiary education. So fees were supposed to give an increase and a longevity to investment, some guaranteed income for the universities. And this also means that more people from disadvantaged backgrounds should be able to go to university simply because there are more places available for these students. Now, you may disagree with these aims. You may disagree that 50% of young people should be going into higher education. Well, you're free to disagree, and please do disagree in the comments. But assuming that these aims are sound ones and ones that you want to see, then it's got to be funded somehow. So this was the purpose of bringing in tuition fees. It was extra money that would be reclaimed from graduates over a 25 or 30 year period after they graduated. But it's also worth noting that even with the fee system, the government only gets back £1 for every £2 they spend on higher education. So half the money they spend, they don't get back. Meaning that the taxpayer pays a lot of money into higher education and into universities. It's not true at all to say that it's totally graduate funded. It simply isn't. So the post-2012 system, the current system in force at the moment, raised fees to £9,000 a year. There is interest on the loans given for tuition fees and for maintenance, and that is at the rate of the retail prices index, which is inflation effectively. And if you earn £21,000, which is the repayment threshold, there's no additional interest, so basically the value of your loan stays the same across time. But the rate of interest is graduated all the way up to if you're earning £41,000 a year, in which case it is RPI plus 3%. So you're effectively paying a 3% extra if you earn £41,000 a year. However, like I said, there's a repayment threshold. That repayment threshold is £21,000 a year, and you only pay 9% above that threshold. And you only pay that for a maximum of 30 years after you graduate. So, for example, and these are all in 2017 prices, you might have a debt of £40,000. So that's 3 years of £9,000 tuition fees plus an arbitrary £13,000 worth of maintenance loans. So that's £40,000 worth of student loan debt overall. If you earn £21,000 for those 30 years after graduation and not a penny more, then you won't pay a penny in repayments, it will be wiped off and the taxpayer will pick up your entire loan for fees and your maintenance. If you earn £25,000 a year on average over those 30 years, then you will pay a little over £10,000. It's £10,800 if you earn exactly on average £25,000. And that barely covers your maintenance costs, never mind paying any of your tuition fees. If you earn £35,000 a year on average over these 30 years, then you will pay £37,800, which is just short perhaps of the £40,000 that you borrowed, but you haven't paid off any of the interest. And there's still a bit of capital which you haven't paid off, but of course that just gets picked up by the taxpayer after 30 years. And if you earn £40,000 a year, then you will pay off £51,300 or thereabouts, and with the interest accruing over that time, you'll probably just about pay that off within the 30-year time period. And if you earn over this amount on average, then you're going to pay the entirety of the balance off before you get to the 30 years. So when that's done, you don't pay any more, but that's the amount that you would have paid anyway. So I think we can see from this that you can forget the £9,000 price tag. It's not really an amount. It's just a maximum amount of additional marginal tax that you have to pay as a graduate. And the cost for all graduates is shared between the graduate and the taxpayer. And the taxpayers put the money up front. So, you don't have to pay a penny to actually go to university. You only repay it later. Under the system, there is no limit on student numbers, which means there are record numbers of students from disadvantaged backgrounds going to university at the moment, although there is, of course, still more to do with that. So I think you can see that although there's obviously a lot of sharp opinions around tuition fees, it's not as black and white as you might think, and my views are quite nuanced on this as well. I'm not saying there should be a £9,000 fees or £20,000 fees or £100,000 fees, but if you're saying that you're only paying back 9% above the £21,000 threshold, and that threshold goes up with inflation every year as well, then I don't see why that is unfair for students. It really isn't. But let's look at the other options on the table. There are basically two other major options. One of them is the current NUS policy, which is to call for free education. Well, when I say free, I'm going to say free in inverted commas, because somebody's got to pay for it. It's the current Labour policy under Jeremy Corbyn, and obviously that's what he ran with at the general election. And it's also the current situation in Scotland. However, there are falling numbers of students from disadvantaged backgrounds in Scotland, and that's because the number of places available at Scottish universities has had to be drastically cut. Currently, I think it's only about 28% of young people going to university in Scotland, simply because there is not enough money to fund more than that going to university. However, fees are still charged for non-Scottish UK students, and the government does provide the student loan system for you to pay for those fees. But guess what? They're set at £9,000. In my opinion, and this is of course only my opinion, feel free to disagree with me in the comments, but this is unsustainable for England and Wales, and probably Scotland too in the long term. The only real other way out of it would be to raise general taxation, and that would mean that you'd have people who wouldn't have the benefit of going to university because they would never be able to get the grades, or just simply don't want to go to university, paying for the people who did go to university, which is a really odd system if you think about it. You're not required to go to university, and of course there just simply isn't enough places at university for everybody to go. So surely it's better for the people who actually had the experience and the advantage of going to university to pay for that. And also, versus the current system, free education would be a massive tax cut for high earners. So that £40,000 example I just used a moment ago, that would mean that £50,000 worth of additional revenue taken from that graduate would have to be put into general taxation, and so another £20,000 on average from everybody, perhaps, to pay for that? It's a bit odd, isn't it? Now, the third system, and this was the NUS policy between 2008 and 2013, or a similar version of it at least, is a graduate tax. Basically what a graduate tax is an additional tax paid by graduates and is set by the government. Now, you could set this at almost exactly the same terms that we have for student loans at the moment. So, for example, paying it at 9% above a lower threshold of, say, £21,000. You could have a time limit of 30 years after graduation that you have to pay this tax. You could even have a maximum amount that you would pay with this tax, say set it at £50,000 or £60,000. There is a few problems with it. The first one is the issue of getting repayments from students that move abroad after graduation. So currently, because it's a loan, you are contractually obliged to repay it under the terms of that loan, whether you move abroad or otherwise. But there are advantages. There's no debt stigma. There's no specific price tag to go into university. Under these conditions, there is a similar amount of money which you reclaim from graduates. But I think we can probably see here that there are many systems competing, and there are so many problems perhaps with free education. There are definitely problems with having tuition fees, and a graduate tax could take the best of those two things, but also has its problems with repayments from abroad. And my views have always been nuanced on this, and it's not simple. And I don't think it's as easy as saying that tuition fees are bad, because there are so many good things about tuition fees, not least because it means that more people from disadvantaged backgrounds have the opportunity to go to university, which if you didn't have fees and you didn't put taxation up wildly, meant that there wouldn't be enough places for those disadvantaged students. I'm sure everybody's going to have lots of comments about this, so please don't forget to leave comments down below. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. You can subscribe right here. I make new videos every single week, and you can watch another video right away about here. Thanks for watching. I shall see you next time. Bye-bye.